backpack buried beneath the ground, double-wrapped in black plastic. It had remained hidden under a rural North Carolina highway for more than 18 months before anyone found it. Inside, clothing, a pencil case, a sheet of paper, and a name written on the outside of the bag itself, as if whoever put it there wanted it to be found eventually, or perhaps wanted it never to be found at all. A 9-year-old girl had walked out of her home in the middle of the night, during one of the worst storms of the year, into complete darkness, and she was never seen alive again. No body, no confirmed suspect, no final answer, just a buried bag, a photograph of an unknown little girl, and a silence that has lasted more than 2 decades. Asha Degree was born on August 5, 1990, to Harold and Akila Degree, the second child in a close-knit, deeply religious family living at 34040 Crest Drive in Shelby, North Carolina. Her grandmother and aunt lived just doors away on the same street. This was not a household where a child felt isolated or overlooked. At school, Asha was exceptional, strong in science and mathematics, with near-perfect attendance. Outside the classroom, she loved basketball and dreamed of one day becoming an illustrator. Those who knew her described her as polite, careful, and mild-mannered. A rule follower. Not a child who acted on impulse. There is one detail about Asha that becomes quietly important later. She was terrified of dogs, so frightened that the fear would sometimes stop her from leaving the house altogether. A child carrying that kind of fear does not walk out alone into a stormy night without something driving her. Something strong enough to override everything she was afraid of. What that was, nobody has ever been able to say with certainty. The disappearance. The days leading up to Asha's disappearance matter. On February 12, 2000, 2 days before Valentine's Day, Asha played in a basketball game. It was the first game of the season and it did not go well. Her team lost and Asha fouled out during the match. She blamed herself. For a girl who cared as deeply about basketball as Asha did, this was not something she could simply set aside. That night she stayed at her cousin's house and her mood began to lift. But the game stayed with her. She kept bringing it up. It was sitting on her, heavier than it appeared on the surface. February 14, 2000. Valentine's Day. It was also Harold and Akila's wedding anniversary. That evening, a severe storm rolled through Shelby. The power went out at the Degree home and didn't come back until just after midnight. Harold, unable to sleep, stayed up watching television. At approximately 2:30 in the morning, he checked on both of his children. They were in their beds. Everything was exactly as it should have been. Sometime before dawn, Asha's brother O'Brien heard her moving. He heard her get up and walk to the bathroom. He thought nothing of it. Children wake in the night. It is ordinary. At 5:45 in the morning, Akila rose to run a bath. When she went to wake Asha, the bed was empty. She assumed Asha had simply gotten herself up early. But Asha was not downstairs. And when the family looked more carefully, they saw that her book bag was gone. So was her house key. They called Grandmother Joanne. They called Aunt Alicia. Neither had seen her. Just after 6:30 in the morning, the family called 911. Sheriff Dan Crawford and officers from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office arrived and began their search. The State Bureau of Investigation was called in. By early afternoon, the Degree home had been cordoned off. Investigators examined every inch of the property. There was no sign of a break-in. No forced entry. Both the front and back doors could be opened from the inside without a key. There was no evidence of a struggle. No indication of foul play anywhere inside the house. Sniffer dogs were brought in. They were unable to pick up a scent. Outside, the conditions were severe. The storm had left the roads wet, the air cold, and the pre-dawn hours completely dark. The question investigators kept circling back to was the same one the family couldn't answer. Why would a 9-year-old girl leave her home alone, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm? By that afternoon, 2 witnesses had come forward independently. The first was a 25-year-old truck driver who had seen Asha's face on the news during his lunch break. He said that earlier that morning, while driving along Highway 18, he had noticed a young girl walking alone along the roadside. He found it unusual enough that he circled his truck around not once but 3 times. On the third pass, Asha spotted him coming back. She didn't slow down. She left the road entirely and ran into the woods. The second witness was a former deputy with the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. He had been driving with his son and noticed a small figure moving along the highway in the dark. They didn't stop at the time, but he radioed out to other truckers to keep watch. Later, after speaking with his wife and realizing the possible connection to the missing girl, he drove to the command post that had been set up at Mulls Memorial Baptist Church to report what he had seen. A review of the Degree home confirmed that Asha had taken several items with her: candy from her basketball game, some clothing, paper, and pencils. This suggested her departure was not entirely spontaneous. She had made choices about what to bring. Police widened their search to a 5-mile radius. Then came a discovery that shifted the investigation. Volunteers Raleigh and Debbie Turner were asked to check their property, an upholstery business along Highway 18, approximately 20 minutes from the Degree home. On the land stood an old shed with no door, sitting roughly 300 feet back from the road. Inside, the volunteers found candy wrappers matching the sweets Asha had taken with her. They also found a Minnie Mouse hair bow, a marker pen, and something that stopped everyone: a photograph of a little girl that no one recognized. The Turners initially thought the items were too far from the Degree home to be connected, but they handed everything over the following day. Asha's family identified nearly every item immediately. The wrappers, the hair bow, the marker, all hers. But the photograph was not. Nobody in the family knew the girl in the picture. Nobody from Asha's school recognized her either. Investigators now theorized that Asha had walked south along Highway 18, passed through the area near the shed, and then run into the woods when the truck circled back. Beyond that point, the trail went cold. On February 20, 2000, after more than 9,000 man-hours of searching, the official search was called off. Investigators were satisfied she was no longer in the immediate area. Where she was, they could not say. The family submitted voluntarily to polygraph tests in March of that year. Every one of them passed. Then in the summer of 2000, the case took a turn that proved to be a dead end. A former classmate of Asha's mother, a man named Baron Ramsey, confessed to being involved in her disappearance. He claimed that he and another man had accidentally struck Asha while she was walking along Highway 18 during a drug deal, that she had died on impact, and that they had driven her body to Moss Lake and disposed of it in the water. Police conducted 2 thorough searches of the lake. They found nothing. They also examined the location where Ramsey claimed the collision had occurred. No physical evidence. No trace of Asha's blood. Investigators concluded he had fabricated the entire story in an attempt to leverage a better deal in a separate armed robbery case he was facing. Then, on August 2, 2001, 18 months after Asha vanished, a contractor named Terry Fleming was doing driveway work along Highway 18 when his equipment struck something buried beneath the ground. He pulled up a black plastic bag, double-wrapped. When he finally got it open, he found a book bag inside. On the outside of the bag, written clearly, was a name, Asha Degree, alongside a phone number. Fleming had no mobile signal, so he wrote down the details and went home. The following morning, his wife recognized the name immediately. They contacted police. Sheriff Crawford confirmed that the bag had been buried for a significant period of time and that between 90 and 99% of its contents belonged to Asha. Among the items reported were clothing, a sheet of paper, and a pencil case. Cadaver dogs were brought in and alerted to 3 locations near the burial site. Nothing was recovered. Investigators also found a pair of men's trousers and a set of car keys in the area. Whether they are connected to the bag remains unclear. In the years that followed, investigators looked at multiple persons of interest, including 2 brothers with violent criminal records who lived in the area at the time. DNA and hair samples were collected. Both were eventually ruled out. A convicted murderer named Donald Ferguson, who had been linked to the sexual assault and killing of another young girl in North Carolina, was also examined as a possible suspect after his 2015 arrest. No official connection to Asha's case has been confirmed. In 2015, the FBI formally joined the investigation, working alongside the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. In May 2016, A witness came forward to report seeing a young girl matching Asha's description getting into what appeared to be a dark green 1970s Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a similar model Ford. In September 2017, the FBI brought in its child abduction rapid deployment team to assist. On the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, investigators confirmed that additional items had been found inside Asha's book bag, a copy of a children's book checked out from her school library in early 2000, and a new Kids on the Block t-shirt. Neither item, investigators said, was believed to be in her possession when she left the house that night. The unexplained detail. Of all the strange details in this case, and there are many, one refuses to sit quietly. A grown man in a large truck notices a 9-year-old girl walking alone on a dark highway before dawn, in the middle of a storm. He finds it unusual enough to turn his vehicle around. And then he does it again. And then a third time. When Asha sees the truck coming back around for the third time, she doesn't simply step off to the side. She doesn't wave him down. She doesn't wait. She abandons the road entirely and runs into the trees, into pitch darkness, into a forest, alone in the middle of a storm. Remember what we know about Asha Degree. She was terrified of dogs. A fear so strong it could physically stop her from leaving her own home. And yet, in that moment on Highway 18, the darkness of the woods felt safer to her than whatever was coming down that road. The truck driver came forward voluntarily. He was not named as a suspect. His stated reason for circling was concern. He said he wanted to make sure she was all right. But Asha's reaction tells a different story. Or at least, it raises a question that has never been answered. What did she see in that truck on the third pass that she hadn't seen on the first? What changed? What made her run? And what happened to her in those trees after the road disappeared behind her? No investigation has ever produced a clear answer to any of those questions. The woods that morning gave nothing back. Expert and witness quotes. The case confused even experienced investigators. Early in the search, Sheriff Dan Crawford said there were no signs of forced entry, no clear evidence of a crime, and no obvious reason why Asha had left her home. Search dogs were also unable to find a reliable scent trail. The search itself was massive. Rescue teams spent thousands of hours carefully covering the area, and many believe they would have found her if she had been nearby. Despite all that work, they still had no idea what had happened to her. Asha's family fully cooperated with investigators and passed every polygraph test they were asked to take. Those who knew her described her as a polite child who followed the rules and came from a loving home. Because of that, her disappearance seemed even more difficult to understand. About 18 months later, contractor Terry Fleming discovered Asha's backpack buried in the ground. The bag had been wrapped in 2 layers of plastic, and her name was written on the outside. Fleming later said that something about the discovery immediately felt wrong, as though the bag had been placed there on purpose. Closing question. A 9-year-old girl walks out of her home before dawn. She leaves items behind in a doorless shed along a dark highway. She runs from a truck, not toward it, and disappears into the trees. Her book bag turns up buried beneath the earth more than a year later, double-wrapped, placed there by hands that have never been identified. A photograph of a girl no one recognizes. A name written on the outside of a bag that was hidden underground. 26 years of searching and still no body, no confirmed suspect, no final answer. So the question that has haunted this case since February 14, 2000 remains exactly where it started, unanswered and open. Did Asha Degree choose to walk out into that storm? Or did something or someone already know she would? If you want to uncover the unsolved mysteries and chilling crime story, subscribe to my channel and never miss a shocking case.